Welcome back to another episode of the BioBlueprint podcast, the show where we explore the minds behind innovation in CDMO, CRO, pharma, and beyond. Today, we're diving into the world of cutting-edge trials, diversity in research, and commercial reinvention with a guest who's led it all and then some. Keith is not just a veteran of the life sciences world, he's a clinical trials transformer, from boosting a clinical pipeline by 6,000% in just 2 quarters to driving multi-million-dollar growth in AI-powered health tech. He's led global operations, launched breakthrough recruitment platforms, inked strategic CRO alliances across continents, and introduced clinical trial diversity that is reshaping how research reaches people. With over 2 decades of C-suite experience across pharmaceutical, biotech, and digital health, from Boston to Berlin and startups to global giants, Keith has seen the trials industry from every angle. We hope the episode provides real value, and stay tuned for more. Seeing your journey, following that on LinkedIn and what you are doing with the platform, I think it's awesome. A lot of the people that are in similar situations have experienced similar things, and the advice that you're giving on the platform is absolutely incredible. And I feel like this is something that I must do. So in this episode, we're going to be covering the life sciences scene, which is a pretty broad term, but I'm meaning the ups and downs of the market, the political impact, the reality of people who've been out of jobs for over 12 months, redundancy cycle, and how to deal with, I guess, the uncertainty that is currently being experienced by a lot of people, and of course advice and how to deal with the current market. So thank you so much. Let's start, I guess, on a personal note. Tell us what's been really consistent as a theme throughout your incredible career.
Well, over the course of my career, it's, whether it be, the first half when I was on Wall Street or making the transition to life sciences, I guess about 15 years ago, it really comes down to adaptability, because the markets are never static, and it doesn't matter what industry that you're in. Technology evolves, best practices evolve, external market conditions, are always going to be pretty volatile. And it's inherent on you as a professional and as a person, to continuously, improve yourself, your skills, understand what's happening, not only in your company, but around the world. Because if you're not growing as the market is growing, you're going to be left behind, and left behind pretty quickly.
Yeah, it is spot on. I think, just to summarize what you've said and capture in the simplest way, it is the only thing that's constant is change. You're going to go through cycles of, where the market is doing really well and everyone's investing and everyone's coming and rushing to make things happen. But then you're going to go through periods where you'll see the downturn, and you'll see, venture capital losing confidence, private equity not investing, money being really held and being not as free flowing as it once was. But like you say, the most important thing is adaptability. Would I be right in saying that?
Absolutely. I mean, the markets by their very nature are going to be cyclical, whether that be at a macro level or a sector level. What we've seen in life sciences really over the last 5 years, I don't want to say it was unexpected, but I think that the impact, many of us have underestimated what the impact of lower investment's going to be, regulatory changes, political changes. And now we're looking, at basically $1 trillion industry that's having its day of reckoning as multiple variables, are converging all at once.
Yeah.
So I think it doesn't matter if you're on the sponsor side, the FSP side, the CRO side. there's very much, and I hate to use this cliche, phrase, but it's a new normal. And what worked 5 years ago, or 10 years ago, or 15 years ago is no longer a guarantee of success in 2025 and moving ahead. So, it's going to be the best of times and the worst of times. Now, I know that we're going to go a little bit deeper into, what's plaguing job seekers, at the moment. But I also think it's a pretty unique opportunity for the smaller and mid-sized players within the industry, within life sciences, to take advantage of these market inefficiencies, looking at what the new investment reality is, what the new reimbursement reality is. And I think that you're going to see, the deck of cards get shuffled in terms of who are the innovators and who are the leading players, not only on the sponsor side, but, those industries that work adjacently to support innovative drug and device development.
I love that. And I like how you phrased reckoning. Life sciences is experiencing that, and constantly there is so many different things developing every day. I feel like I've said this quite a few times. I feel like since 2020, since the UK left Brexit, there's been COVID, there's been all of these wars, which is incredibly sad, but obviously has an impact on supply chain, it has an impact
Does.
on everyone. Um, what you said there about obviously the smaller to mid-sized players, it's an opportunity for these guys. If somebody's watching this and they work for they lead a small company or a mid-sized company, what sort of things do they need to be on the lookout for in the current market? What sort of trends? What sort of things they need to be looking out for?
That's a great question. And, when you look at the top three CROs in the industry, I mean,
Yeah.
it takes about 30 seconds to review stock prices, and that's pretty alarming. Okay. But when you look at really where the drivers of innovation take place, it's not at large global pharma, it's not the top 10, really even the top 100 sponsors. It's the small bootstrap biotechs that there are really leading the way in terms of novel development. And, you're looking at very lean companies, with very limited runways. So, they're lean, they're quick. The decision-making process is very, very, progressive in terms of, hey, we need to get things done.
Mm,
Well,
mm,
if you're partnering with a large CRO, and you're working on a $6 to $8 million study, compared to $100 million study, you're not necessarily going to be getting the A team, so to speak.
okay.
So what I like about boutique to small to mid-sized CROs is its attention to detail. It's the personal relationships. Really become an extension of the sponsor's team, rather than an afterthought being, a tier, C or D client. If you're working for a CRO that's doing, let's say, 30 to 50 million revenue a year, that $8 million study, which is going to be a rounding error, for an IQVIA or an
Mm,
Icon, um, that's a major revenue driver for the smaller player.
yeah.
So, you look at not only the official layoffs that have taken place within the CRO space, but the natural attrition as pipeline is being cut and reorganizations are taking place to drive EBITDA and shareholder value. Um, the power to adapt quickly as a smaller service provider compared to being a Titanic level, shop where it's going to take, not weeks to change direction, but in many cases, months or years.
Yeah. Yeah. I I couldn't agree more. The smaller companies tend to lead in innovation, obviously, but it comes down to, like you say, the principles they have. They're a lot more leaner. They when it comes to the decision making process, it's a lot quicker. When it comes to the runway they have, they might be limited, but they need to get really A-class people onboarded for results to take place. And with smaller businesses, they it with bigger companies, you can sort of glide and you can. There's not that much pressure, but in a smaller company, we have to get things done. This has to work, and the drive and the enthusiasm has to be there. You know what I mean?
Oh, I do. I mean, that old cliche that we certainly learned when we were going through university back in the day, you don't get fired by hiring IBM. Okay.
Yeah,
10 years ago would be, you don't get fired for hiring McKinsey. Well, in the life sciences world, it was always you don't get fired for hiring, the Q.
yeah,
Okay. But as the stakes are becoming higher, especially in this market, in terms of the limited investment, limited runways, regulatory uncertainty, reimbursement uncertainty. You need a team that's going to be able to adapt quickly, understand, the dynamics that are impacting the various steps of clinical development.
yeah,
And it really comes down to, and this is kind of a controversial opinion, but delivering those services and becoming that partner of choice, it's a calculated risk. It's a calculated risk, for the biotech hiring that small to mid-size company.
yeah,
And it's, a calculated risk for that small to mid-size CRO working with the biotech. Is the money going to be there? I mean, there are some fundamental challenges, but I think as the industry itself is certainly become more lean over the last 5 years, and especially over the last 6 to 8 quarters as COVID money has dried up, interest
yeah.
rates have spiked.
Mm.
There's no other choice but to do more with less.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I think it's an age-old saying, more is less, and I think now more than ever that really applies to a lot of companies. Um, okay, I own a small biotech. Have an idea, we're working on it. I own a small CDMO, or I own a small CRO, whatever the case is. Um, and I want to build an A-class team. You mentioned the bigger companies maybe don't necessarily have access to that, or will hire with that in mind. But if I'm a CSO or a CTO or a CEO, whatever, and I'm looking for those A-class players, what are the sort of things I should be on the lookout for?
I think one of the unifying things that I've seen over the years, whether it be on the clinical or regulatory side, there's always a preference for somebody that has ex-FDA experience. Okay.
Mm,
Understanding how that sausage is made, who understands the process and the regulations surrounding, running and managing a study, but then also facilitating those submissions. And, there historically has been a really, really rich pipeline of, scientists and professionals, who have worked at the agency. They get that regulatory experience, from the inside out, and then they shift over to industry. And there's certainly a tendency for them to go to the top 3 or 5 CROs,
mm,
but then they realize that, these are big organizations. There's, SOPs galore, that are internal SOPs,
yeah,
and what might take, let's say, a month, at a large shop might take 2 days at a smaller shop.
right,
So,
right,
and I think as CRO layoffs have accelerated over the last couple of years, you're seeing a migration from the large zeros who historically pay, better than the small to mid-size, um, uh, going to the smaller shops. And I
yeah,
think that, right now there's such an abundance of talent in the marketplace right now that it really is an opportunity for these smaller companies that are supporting studies and submissions to poach world-class talent that they may not
Mm.
have, as recently as 18 months ago.
Yeah, yeah. It is. It is. It boggles my mind sometimes when you look at. Um, I've done this for 9 years, and I don't have as much, I guess, knowledge, know-how, in terms of running a CRO, or a CDMO, but I've worked with on the side of these leaders. Um, with like you said, there's an abundance of talent right now in the market, and I still see, these growing companies, and companies that are, you know, investing in sites and acquiring companies, other businesses. They still somehow um, don't have access to this talent, which we'll obviously come back to. As you said, there's an abundance of that, and that's one of the biggest things I wanna cover. But it's a little bit crazy where you're still seeing companies struggle to hire the right people, even where there's so many candidates in the market. I would go as far as saying, there's a recruitment term. Right now, it's candidate heavy, if you can say that, because there's a lot more people in the market than there are jobs. I think there's changes happening, and I think it's certainly improving, but I think it's at a very slow pace. You would agree, or
I am. I think that for especially, the smaller sponsors, it's like being a kid in a candy store when it comes to talent right now, where, there's so many people looking for positions right now. Ultimately, Leonard, I think it comes down to the analysis, what is it? The paralysis of analysis.
yeah,
Where one of the companies with whom I consult, they had me a part of their hiring process, looking at some candidates recently. Okay, and they received, I don't know, 700 CVs, of which 50, I would say 50 were 95% aligned with the role or above. Okay, and there were so many rounds of like discernment. Okay, of these 60 people, who do we want to talk to? And at the end of the day, any one of those, 50, 60 candidates would have been able to come in, do the
mm,
job. And unfortunately, it's kind of like when you have kids and you're trying to make dinner for a 2-year old. Okay, you're not giving them 15 choices because they're going to be, taking 3 hours to make that decision.
mm,
If you give that child, okay, do you want this or that for dinner? That's it. You're going to be able to make those choices pretty quickly.
yeah,
But ultimately, if you even take it away from like the business standpoint, from the mindset of an executive, if
yeah,
you're going out to spend $200,000 or $300,000 and you're an early stage company, on a
mm,
candidate plus benefits, um, that is an extraordinary expenditure for that company. So you don't want to
yeah.
make a mistake. And I think it's a subconscious thing, to be perfectly frank, of kicking the can down the road to avoid making a decision, which could significantly impact the direction of your company.
Right, right. Well, so this example that you've just shared, if this business had that many CVs and they had that many, I guess, qualified candidates, that's a great place to be. That's an amazing pool of individuals you can choose, and essentially you can go as far as saying you can pick and choose who you
Mhm.
hire when you have that many people who could be, as you say, 95% qualified. But as you say, it's a big risk. At the same time, to go and invest, money into a candidate, plus benefits. So, like you say, maybe the decision making gets elongated because no one wants to take the accountability for making that decision, because it can severely change the direction of where the company heads. So there is that risk, but I think ultimately you'd rather you'd rather make a wrong hire to get to the right hire quicker than have the space empty. Surely that affects the company more negatively. I could be wrong.
No, I think you're right. I mean, there's a certain line of thinking of which, I subscribe to, that you hire quickly and you fire quickly.
Right.
And, I mean, think about what the job market was 4 or 5 years ago. I mean, I
Absolutely.
had gone through a layoff, and, within 6 or 7 weeks, I had, no less than 7 or 8 written offers, on the table. And there was every incentive in the world for these companies to hire quickly, because, if you had a hiring process that was lasting 6, 7, 8, 9 weeks, that, number one rated candidate is going to be gone.
Yeah.
Okay. You
Spot on.
know, but today, where there is such a glut, of candidates out there, there's no incentive for these companies, to act swiftly and be
Mm.
decisive when it makes hiring decisions. So, as I speak to job seekers, today, it's not uncommon to hear processes with 6, 7, 8, 9 rounds of interviews, 2 or 3 unpaid projects. And, you go through the process only to hear that, oh, well, thank you for spending the last, 2 or 3 months on this, but we just lost the budget. Okay. And it's a refrain that I hear virtually on a daily basis. So I think that, the industry, for a lack of a better word, is treading water when it comes to
Mm.
hiring. Just because, there's a lot of people tiptoeing around the subject. But when you look at macroeconomic conditions and how they're impacting the life sciences industry, there's a lot to suggest that things are going to get a hell of a lot worse before they get better.
Wow.
And, and that's the reality that we're dealing with today.
It's just obviously for people who are in that situation, it's a very grim reality, and it is scary. Especially you've felt this firsthand when you have so much experience, and what you bring to the table is so immense. And it's coming up to so much time where you've been looking and you've been out there. You think what is going on, what is happening, because um what you hear online or the news outlets or LinkedIn, it's all looking really positive and upbeat. Private equity is raising or has invested crazy amount of money, record breaking money. But all of that takes time to trickle, and all of that takes time to come to sponsors, comes to as the biotech spends or pharma spends, it takes time to come to the sponsor side. So you can you can advertise things are looking good, but the reality is grim, like you say. I we'll talk about this, and we'll come back to this. But I just we were talking the other day, and you shared a really interesting example, um, and it was an executive you had worked
Oh,
with in the past, and they had photos of sharks in the office. Maybe I'm getting
yes,
this wrong. And
yes.
you went into the office and you said, why so many photos of sharks in the office? The person gave you the answer, which I'll let you explain, and then I have a follow up question after that.
Sure. So I was a young man. I might have been 24 or 25 years old. I was working for the CEO of a Fortune 500 company at this time, and had access to every senior executive in this company as I was helping to launch companies throughout Southeast Asia and China. And there was this one executive that had a pretty horrific reputation. And for whatever reason, this person took a shining to me and invited me to the office for lunch. And like you said, there must have been 30, 40, 50 framed and matted beautiful pictures of great white sharks, hammerhead sharks, the man eaters. And I said to this person, wow, these are pretty incredible pictures. Are you into scuba diving? And This person said, and I'll edit the response, but it was said, no, every picture um, commemorates a time that I had to screw somebody over to get ahead in my own
To the
career.
top.
And
Okay,
I just
that's it.
sat there dumbfounded.
Yeah,
Dumbfounded.
when you told me this the other day, um, it's stuck with me, and that's why obviously I wanted to bring it up. I mean, in your career, you've been doing this for a long time. Um, is to get to success, to get to the top of your game, a lot of people have to be cutthroat, and a lot of people have to be really focused, and I guess you can go as far as saying extremely selfish as well to get to a certain level of success. Um, but do you think that that is also linked to um, screwing people over, or can you get to the top without doing that? It's a controversial question, but I thought I'd ask.
I think it's a very fair question. I can't project what other people think or how they act, but for me it was a vital lesson over the course of my career because this person was brilliant. I mean, in terms of execution, in terms of how they managed, what they managed, really world class. And there's a reason why, an executive vice president at one of the largest companies in the world.
That's
Now,
fair.
for me, I think that my Catholic guilt has always prevented me, from being that type of person. I'm a firm believer that, you can be, ethically astute, you can be a good person, without having to screw people over. Okay.
Mm.
Now, have I gotten feedback over the course of my career where, I care too much about my people or the clients, or, I'm not vicious enough? But you get to a point. I remember sitting with the CEO of one of my companies in Singapore, British
Mm.
expat, and he goes, Keith, he goes, you get to a certain point in your career where it doesn't matter how smart you are, how good you are at your job, it comes down to how political you are.
Right.
And he goes, the best people don't always get the job, but the most cutthroat and politically astute often do. So you have to make a decision, what is your pain tolerance, of ethical behavior? What are you willing to accept and what are you unwilling to accept? For me, I want to be able to start my day and end my day looking at myself, in the mirror,
Mm.
knowing that, I did a great job. I treated people with respect, empowering them, to deliver on what their roles and responsibilities are. Now, has that negatively impacted me over the course of my career? In
Right.
certain circumstances, absolutely. Okay.
Mm.
But, you know, um, uh, what I'm willing to accept and how I'm willing to manage is going to be completely different than other people.
Yeah.
And every company culture is different. Every executive, management style is different. But it's also, not 1958. It's not
Yeah.
1998. And it's not even
Yeah.
2008. I mean, the world has changed pretty significantly. And
For
I
sure.
think that the corporate world has certainly gotten softer over the years. And what was tolerated 10, 15, 20 years ago
Yeah.
certainly wouldn't be tolerated today. I think that a lot of reason for that advent of social media and the chat
Yeah.
platforms. And, if you treat people poorly, it's going to get around and it's going to get around quickly.
100%. 100%. Which isn't a bad thing. It's a plus where we have things dedicated to mental health and wellness, well-being of your people. I think that's not a bad thing. And yeah, I can imagine obviously in contrast to what was allowed or could happen 10, 15, 20 years ago, we live in a completely different world now.
Mhm.
I want to talk about the life sciences, I guess, space right now, and this part is for the people who, as I said to you before, those who've been really struggling to find jobs, those who have been out of a job for 6, 12, 18 plus months. They're interviewing with companies. They have multiple processes, as you said earlier. But something's not clicking and something's not happening. It's it's something I'm seeing a lot more come up on LinkedIn. And before we started this, I was mentioning to you, I think you've been a great voice in relating to these people, in raising their side of the story, which is equally important, because you can talk about the online world as being just the highlights of what's happening in a good way, your achievements, milestones you're hitting, the growth, but you relate it to the other side of that. I feel like there's a dark side of the I guess the market, which is what a lot of people are experiencing. Um, so since 2020, in your, I guess, overview up until now, what's been happening in the market, and how do we deal with it going forward?
I mean, it's a terrific question. I mean, even since 2020, I mean, I've been laid off 3 times. And, that's 3 times in 5 years and seven over the course of my entire career. Now, as it relates to life sciences, it's funding, funding, funding. I think that the injection of free capital from the federal government, as that started driving up, as interest rates were really getting driven up, it made a speculative business, almost a reckless business from, an investment standpoint. And
Mm,
even the investors that I speak to, I think one said it very succinctly, and he just hit it the nail on the head. He goes, Keith, he goes, I can spend $50 million like on a Series B right now, where I'm going to get a 1 in 5,000 chance that that drug is going to make it to market and we're actually going to see ROI in that. He goes, or I can take that capital and park it, in an institutional money market account earning 7.5% right now. As you can see behind me, I've got a lot of space memorabilia behind me. And during NASA in the early 60s, there was a phrase that was, hey, no bucks, no Buck Rogers. We are, in life sciences, we're in an expensive business, where it's costing what, $1.8 billion to bring a candidate to market now, as studies are becoming more global, as the technology is becoming more complex. A lack of working capital, an uncertain, reimbursement environment. There are a lot of things, creating those headwinds right now. So, I started writing on LinkedIn about layoffs, because I wanted people to know that it doesn't matter how much seniority you have, how big your title is, everybody is at risk of getting laid off. If you look at the big CROs right now, probably, the most significant amount of layoffs that I've seen have been at that VP level and above.
mm,
People that may have been at a company 15, 20, 25, 30 years, they're being let go. And you hear a lot of yelling on the boards, talking about ageism, talking about that. I mean, honestly, I look at it from a unique perspective as somebody who's been laid off a lot, but then also somebody who's been a C-level executive. It's not about age, it's about cost containment. I mean,
mm,
when you're seeing stock prices that are down 35, 40, 50, 55% year over year, well, you need to be able to trim your costs when, the market that you serve is suffering. So, the unintended consequence of all of this is that, we are now seeing a white collar career massacre right now. Not only in life sciences. I mean, you look at life sciences, IT, techs, cybersecurity, accounting, legal. There's a lot of reasons why these layoffs are happening. And, we've talked about the macroeconomic, but we're also talking about AI innovation and how you can automate a lot of things. Um, so we're looking at a population of the workforce, which is typically higher paid, okay, in a market that's shrinking with tools that are accelerating, that are making, this market segment or market population redundant. And I think that for millions of white collar workers right now, they're living a bit of a nightmare that I don't think is accurately being represented, in the mainstream media, in the newspapers, because when you look at the monthly Department of Labor numbers, you're still looking at, unemployment of what, 4.3, 4.8%, right in that area.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that is not taking into consideration, people who are now off, unemployment, who are piecing together 2 or 3, part-time jobs or consulting gigs. And depending on certain sources, that number really is closer to 23%, 24% of white collar workers either being underemployed or underemployed right now. So it's kind of a scary time for a lot of people.
Yeah, and this is why I wanted to talk about this, because I did some research. You look at articles, you look at employment rates, you look at even ChatGPT. You ask ChatGPT is a
Yeah.
great tool for sure, and I think it just highlights a very biased reality and a very biased picture of what's happening in the market. It will say, you know, when you look at 2024, employment was as low as it's been for the last 3 4 years. Or if you look at the life sciences or the biopharma market in particular, it will tell you online it's actually looking really good, and it's investments back. People are being hired. There's jobs in the market again. So the online world will give you that illusion. This is the case, but I see people, and obviously, as I mentioned, you're a lot of people engage with you on LinkedIn, and I see this more and more now, where people are starting to write about their struggles and write about the issues that they're facing, the 7 to 8 processes they have to be in. I was speaking to somebody who has been in the commercial space, in the CDMO area, and they had to go and get allowance from the government, because they couldn't find a job. And this is, I don't know if it's same in the US as it is in the UK. You get a certain amount of allowance to live off, which you think about a person who is in the commercial space struggling as much as that is. It is scary. It is really scary, and I feel like a lot of people maybe are in similar situations.
Well, I mean, the amount of people that have reached out to me, either in DMs on LinkedIn or giving me a call or emailing, talking about the financial challenges that they're under. Looking at bankruptcies, I've been hearing a lot of bankruptcy talk lately because most companies, if you're lucky, get 6 to 8, 6 to 8 weeks, of severance, at your full salary. And then, you're looking at, a pittance in terms of unemployment that you're going to get from your local state. During my most recent layoff, it was such a situation where I did not receive a severance package, despite being the chief commercial officer of the company. I understood it. I mean, I understood the economics behind it. But putting into perspective for you, the unemployment that I received, coming out of Massachusetts, was very, very generous compared to other states. But putting it into context for you, what I was making a week in unemployment was what I would make by lunchtime Monday afternoon. Okay. And, and that was in a generous state. I mean, there are people that have reached out to me, Leonard, saying that their unemployment for the week was $109.
Wow.
And, with the cost of living, what it is, inflation, even going to the grocery store now, I mean, it's an exercise in pain management because things have gotten so expensive. And, back in 21, 22, as I mentioned earlier in this discussion, I was getting 6, 7, 8 job offers, in a period of weeks. The more senior you are, and depending on, obviously on the set of skills that you have, the more senior you are, the longer it's going to take you to find a job. The old adage when I was growing up, on Wall Street was, it's going to take you 6 months to a year for every $100,000 that you make. Okay.
Right.
And when I speak to fellow executives who have been laid off, the average right now in terms of them finding a job, it's about 27 months right now.
Wow.
If you're at the director level, 18 months ish. And if you're, below the director level, it's ranging, depending on your data source, it's ranging from like 10 to 14 months right now.
Wow.
So one of the lessons that I learned, with 2 layoffs on Wall Street, 5 in life sciences, is that live well beneath your means, okay, if you're able to, stock as much cash away and have liquidity, because your job search is going to take a hell of a lot longer than you would ever expect. And, and when, what I will say about life science workers and workers in general in a down market, they'll do what they have to do to pay the bills and to make ends meet, trying to get gap jobs, working retail jobs, whatever it may be. But the problem that the vast majority of folks are running into now is, and especially with background checks costing so little today, let's say that you as an executive recruiter, Leonard, wanting to go to Home Depot, or Walmart, to get a job. Well, they're not gonna hire you because, number one, this is not your career path, so to speak. But the minute something better comes along, you're gone. So I have a friend of mine on LinkedIn who's been laid off for about 18 months. Both he and his 16 or 17-year-old son went to McDonald's to apply for a job. Okay. The son got hired and they laughed at the dad and said, "We have no need for you." So there is a subset of the American workforce today that truly feels unemployable right now. No fault of their own. They have the degrees, they have the track record of success. Right now, it's just, economics 101, scarcity, that concept of scarcity. The available jobs are few and far between, and the competition is fierce. And if you're at 85% qualified for a position, you're not going to get that call, no matter what the career coaches or the CV writers tell you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like, obviously, you mentioned with people who are in that position, live well below your means. I think that's really practical. From what you've experienced as well, is there anything you would like to say to those guys who are really struggling? Anything else you'd like to add on top of what you've already said?
I honestly take nothing personal. And I know that's easier said than done, because when you're getting rejected, when you're getting ghosted, every single day, multiple times a day, when you suffer through a workday application, which takes you 90 minutes, to re-enter everything that you just uploaded, and you get rejected 90 seconds later, it has nothing to do with you. Your experience is excellent. You didn't become, stupid overnight. You're still intelligent. And I think that, there's a tendency, because we're all human, to take things like, you know what, I'm a failure. I didn't do this right. Um, it wears on you. And it's not anything catastrophic, but it's death by a thousand paper cuts. So, take nothing personally and remember that you're not alone. Your situation is not unique to you because there are millions of other workers going through the exact same thing. And, what I have found is that LinkedIn, for all its doom and gloom, uh, right now, there is a community of job seekers that are going above and beyond helping their fellow job seekers, not only look for jobs and that, but even in many cases, just pick up the phone to vent and to help them get through the day.
Right,
So if you need
right. I think
help, reach out and get it.
that's pretty useful, and it's such an important thing because it can get lonely, it can get dark, it can get scary, it can get uncertain, and it can get very challenging in so many different ways. But I think the message is you're not alone, and it's something that's been experienced by a lot of people, and the support is there if need be, and I think that's a really good message to these people. I wanted to ask you, in what business does Keith belong in, and where do you believe, from everything that you know now, the good, the bad, and the ugly, where does where do you think you can add the most value?
It's a great question. Over the course of my 28-year career, as I've mentioned, I've worked the emerging markets on Wall Street before making the transition to life sciences. I really thrive in regulated environments, which are uncertain. When I never thought in a million years I'd end up in life sciences, not with the only science class I took at university called Foods and Dudes. I kid you not, it was Nutrition 101. Um, but I deal very, very well with ambiguity. Okay. And so, in that regards, I'm very much industry agnostic because a regulated financial market is very, very similar to a regulated life sciences market, which is going to be very, very similar to, let's say, an energy market like nuclear or something like that. So, but when I look through the course of my career, and I've worked for some large, large global brands, but it has always been in the context of either entering new markets, okay, overseas, or launching new services or products or
Mm.
platforms around the world, building out the teams, figuring out the regulations, understanding, the particular market peculiarities. So in many ways, I self-identify, and my teams laugh at me when I say this. I am a corporate anthropologist.
Okay,
Okay. And
okay.
what I mean by that is I have to understand, the mores of the business markets that I'm trying to grow and to penetrate, while in parallel understanding the culture and the drivers and the mores of the teams and the organizations that I work for. And how do you marry those two things together to
Hmm.
make sure that you're entering a market and growing revenue responsibly, culturally appropriate, and that's the challenge that I have, and it's the challenge I enjoy because going into markets that are a bit nebulous with a new product or service, the fun to me is the difficulty of that given challenge of what that market is.
Right.
It's one of the reasons why I've lived and worked as an expat overseas. It's one of the reasons companies come to me, as a consultant today, helping them define go-to-market strategies. How do you go into the United States or China or Brazil or wherever it may be? And then how do you build up, a commercial team, a regulatory team, a sales team that can put all the pieces together, to grow.
Yeah.
So I'm very much, by nature, I'm an introvert. Managing teams and doing a lot of the analysis. But at the same time, I'm also the tip of the spear working with my teams, driving commercial growth, driving revenue and getting to, ownership or investors, whatever their definition of success is.
So a place where there is challenge, a place where um, it's, I guess, tricky and it's emerging. It's not. What I'm trying to say is, you're not going to be going to a company where things are just okay. You want to put yourself in a position where you can really help the business go in a certain direction. That would be the right type of business.
Absolutely. I mean, I can't share the company because I'm under NDA, but there was one company that I partnered with that thought I was crazy. They challenged me and hired me to create a new business plan to kind of shake up, a business that on paper was very successful, but they were going to have some challenges over the long term.
Yeah.
And I took what they did very, very well, look at where there were opportunities to kind of expand the scope of services and geographies in which they were operating. And fast forward 5 or 6 years, that company was acquired for $600 million.
Wow.
And while I wasn't with the company during the exit, I certainly got a call from the CEO saying, you were the tulip bulb. That's exactly what he said. The tulip bulb that got the process rolling, 4 or 5 years ago.
Wow.
Um, so I look at, again, that ambiguity, those challenges, working in very opaque situations, in partnership, not only with, the executive level teams that I engage with on a day to day basis, but also the frontline folks that are selling these projects, implementing the projects, and ultimately delivering them as well.
I think that's really clear. That's really, really clear. Um, I guess obviously you do a. I think I mentioned this maybe three, four times in this discussion already, but you do a an amazing job on LinkedIn in getting people heard. So I guess my last question to you is, what is the best way for people to reach out to you and connect?
LinkedIn is going to be the best. It's Keith Toady, and I receive anywhere from I would say a couple hundred DMs a day from people, looking for support or referrals. And even over the last 2 years since my last full time role, I've helped 160, 170 people find
Wow.
new roles. I've volunteered, hundreds, if not thousands of hours mentoring job seekers.
Wow.
So I think as a leader, you have a responsibility, to help support your team's definition of success,
For
help
sure.
their growth. And I think what job seekers find really quickly is that people that you thought were your friends and colleagues, they disappear or often disappear very quickly when you're laid off. And it's the people that you would least expect who step up to the plate and will go above and beyond to help you. And, I've been very fortunate over the course of my career to have access to executives far above my pay grade, when I was in my 20s and early 30s. It's an opportunity for me to give back, leverage the lessons that I've learned over 7 layoffs, and hope to minimize the pain and suffering that job seekers face every day.
It's as to say, what goes around comes around, right? And you treat people how you want to be treated, and it's it's a cycle. You give out what you can, and it's going to come back in unexpected ways. And I think if somebody's really, like I said earlier, is in a dark place related to a job search where they've exhausted all options and they've exhausted all avenues, and maybe they're having to do something completely different, even though they're really experienced, they have the degree, like the McDonald's example you gave. I think for those people, this is something that's going to be, I hope, really useful. And your message on LinkedIn is really clear, and how you how you are on the platform is awesome. And I really appreciate you you jumping on this with me and doing this.